Good day, this is your instructor, Jerome H. Bautista. And for this course, the teacher and the school curriculum, our new lesson is on linear curriculum development models. Now, in terms of curriculum development, we have defined it already before on what is curriculum development when we had our lesson in curriculum design, but this is another description or definition of what curriculum development is. We have here curriculum development includes all the processes of developing a curriculum as presented by different scholars in curriculum development. There are several curriculum development models that we can use for us to be able to write or design our own curriculum. For that, we have three categories of curriculum models. We have the linear, we have the cyclical, and we have the dynamic. Now, from these terms, we can already see the differences among these three curriculum models. But we are going to focus first on linear curriculum development models. Now, why are these models called linear? Linear comes from the word line. And just imagine a line and just imagine a process such as a line. The models are linear because the process follows the path or a path of one line. The line prescribes a rational step-by-step procedure for curriculum development starting with objectives. So given here is a figure of what a linear curriculum development model is. It follows the path of one line from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. Now, for the different curriculum development models to be discussed in this lesson, all of them will follow the linear development, meaning we have this kind of path that we will follow for us to design or create the curriculum. Now, first we have Tyler's rational linear model. So who developed this first model of curriculum development? Ralph Tyler at the University of Chicago developed the first model of curriculum development. And for many years, it has been the basis of all the curriculum development models that has been developed by other curriculum scholars. This is the most famous among the other models, and this I think is the easiest model to be followed. Tyler argued that curriculum development should be logical and systematic. And so we have a rational linear model. We have reasons on how we can develop the curriculum, and that when we develop it, it has to follow a step-by-step procedure. He presented a sequential pattern from objectives to content, learning experiences, and evaluation. And I think this is very familiar for those who have experienced writing lesson plans already. Now, what was Tyler's argument on how curriculum development should be? According to Tyler, Tyler argued that curriculum developers should respond to 4 basic questions. And these 4 basic questions here align with the steps of Tyler's model. What educational purposes should schools seek to attain? What educational experiences are likely to attain these objectives? How can these educational experiences be organized? And how can we determine whether these purposes are being attained? This is the model of Tyler. So this is the Tyler's rational linear model. And as we can see, Tyler, aside from addressing the 4 questions, he also tried to identify our 3 sources, our 3 curriculum sources, which are influential on how we are going to develop the curriculum. So we have the curriculum sources, society, students, and subject matter. At the same time, Tyler also recognizes that we need to look into in our philosophy of education and psychology of learning for us to be able to screen very well the objectives that we will include in our curriculum. So from those foundations, the curriculum developers can now start with selecting objectives, and then second, selecting learning experiences. Third, organizing learning experiences. And lastly, we have the evaluation. And it's very simple and it's very easy to follow. The next linear curriculum development model that we have is Tabas Grassroots Rationale Model. We still have the word rationale, meaning there are reasons for this curriculum development. And it has to be founded on some things which are deemed important. So how is Tabas model different from Tyler's? Hilda Tabas model is a modified version of Tyler's model. They both show logical, sequential, and logical, a systematic process. They are similar, only that there are additional inputs from Hilda Taba. She argued that curriculum development needs more information input in all phases of curriculum development. And I think Hilda Taba also gave importance on including teachers as important aspects in curriculum development. For Tyler, Tyler did not mention who should be the first ones to do the first step of curriculum development. But for Hilda Taba, since it is grassroots, our grassroots are our teachers. And the teachers are knowledgeable on how the curriculum was implemented before and could be implemented. So they have a lot of influence in the curriculum that we are developing. So what are the additional inputs of Taba on curriculum development? So I will show you a table presenting the differences and similarities of Tyler's model and Taba's model. So Tyler has 4 steps while Taba has 7 steps. And we can see similarities already. Selecting objectives for Tyler is similar with formulation of objectives with Taba. Selecting learning experiences for Tyler is similar with selection of learning experiences for Taba. Organizing learning experiences of Tyler is similar with organization of learning experiences of Taba. And evaluation of Tyler is similar with determination of what to evaluate and ways and means of doing it. Therefore, what are the additional inputs? We have diagnosis of needs, selection of content, and organization of content. And the diagnosis of needs is the most striking characteristic of the Hilda Tabas grassroots rationale model. So what did Taba suggest to make curriculum development more successful? To make it more successful, diagnosis of needs is needed. And we know that we have to consider our learners and we need to know their needs so that we can create a relevant and responsive curriculum for them. This would help curriculum workers in understanding the needs of the learners, making the curriculum more learner-centered. And lastly, it will also help in the selection of goals and objectives and in the selection of contents. And we know very well that the objectives are, I think, the most important part of curriculum development because the objectives, the goals will set the directions for the rest of the curriculum that we are trying to design. The third linear curriculum development model that we have is the standards-based curriculum development model. And this model is quite different from the model of Tyler and Taba. So who developed this standards-based curriculum development model? Alan Glathorne developed the standards-based curriculum development model. And from the title itself, standards-based, the focus of this model is on developing standards. This model is intended for any discipline from basic education to higher education. And there are 3 phases in this model: prescribing a sequence of curriculum development activities to develop standards. Again, the focus of this model is on developing standards. The three phases in this model focus on how standards can be generated or created and further developed. So what are the different phases of this model? The model starts with phase one, development of standards. And then we have phase two, development of benchmarks. And phase three, development of final products. For phase one, on developing of standards, we have the following things that we can do. Develop a comprehensive set of content standards using multiple sources. The sources can be the learners, the society, or the discipline, and other sources that we can identify. Refine the comprehensive list by eliminating and combining. So from an initial set of content standards, it will go through refinement because it is possible to eliminate some standards, especially if they are not essential, or it is possible to combine standards into one. Also, in this phase, we secure teacher input to identify teacher priorities. There are instances in developing standards that we need to consider how teachers were able to implement a curriculum previously, or how they see a curriculum should be implemented for the next school year or for the next academic period. And so they have so much to say about this content standards. And lastly, we can use data to develop the final draft of standards. And the data can be coming from the first three steps that we did, divided into essential standards and enrichment standards. Basically, the essential standards are required, and the enrichment standards are there if we need enrichment of learning for our students. For phase two, we have development benchmarks. Benchmarks are standards that were set by others or by other schools or by other institutions, which we can adopt or which we can pattern our standards to. It's like looking at the standards of one prestigious school and knowing and understanding their standards and using that to develop our own standards or to further improve our own set of standards. So in developing benchmarks, we review decisions about content emphasis. We can review the decisions of other schools and try to reflect on why these schools focus on these standards rather than the others. We can identify standards for continuing development, like standards that will not be benchmarked or standards that are unique for the school or for the institution. We can also decide how benchmarks will be identified by task force or by teachers. It could be a representative from the school, the head teachers maybe, or it could be the plain faculty teachers or plain faculty members, I should say. And lastly, a part of this phase two is to develop initial draft of benchmarks, evaluation or evaluating with criteria provided, and secure teacher review. Again, we involve the teachers and revise the benchmarks if needed. And the last phase is to develop the final products. The third phase is develop final products, and these are the following that will be done for this phase. Use standards and benchmarks to produce a scope and sequence chart. Decide on curriculum guide content, meaning we are already finalizing all the standards and benchmarks that we made from phase one and phase two. And so we now go to developing the final product or the final set of standards that will be communicated to the teachers who will be implementing the curriculum. Analyze benchmarks into learning objectives, and that's it for the phase three. So other things that we need to know about the standards-based curriculum development model. What does this model emphasize? Now, I have mentioned a while back that the three phases focus on developing standards. And that is the main emphasis of this standards-based curriculum development model. It emphasizes this activity as the first of the activities of curriculum development. And what does this model recognize? This model recognizes the importance of using multiple sources and the teacher's inputs. So I have mentioned in the previews that teacher inputs are very important because they know how the curriculum was implemented before, and they have more knowledge on how curriculum can be properly implemented in the actual classroom. Now, teacher inputs is one of the neglected ideas in the Philippine setting because what we follow in the Philippines is a top-down approach, wherein the decisions will be coming from the top posts or the administration, and then the teachers will only serve as implementers, but not for standards-based curriculum development model. And of course, this is also emphasized in Hilda Tabas' grassroots rationale model, that we need to involve teachers at the beginning of our curriculum development. So what makes the model incomplete? I think comparing the model with Tyler and Taba, you can already see the difference because there are so many steps for Tyler and Taba, but for standards-based curriculum development model, although there are three phases, the three phases focus only on development of standards. The model is incomplete because it only focuses on developing curriculum standards. It doesn't have the other steps like in the models of Tyler and Taba. Now we have the last linear curriculum development model for this lesson, which is the understanding by design model, or the UBD. So who are the developers of this model? We have Wiggins and McTighe. And this model was first introduced in 2002 and further developed in 2005. How did it become a byword in the Philippine educational system? There was a period in our basic education that UBD was used as a main framework in developing lesson or learning plans of our teachers. It became a byword in the Philippine educational system because it was used to design the basic education curriculum from 2010 to 2011. That is the elementary education curriculum and the secondary education curriculum, the EEC and SEC. Before, we have the K to 12 curriculum. What is the other name for this model? The other name for this model is backward design. And you will see in the steps of this model why it is called backward design. What is the emphasis of this model? The model's emphasis is on starting with goals and objectives and designing curriculum. I think that's very obvious with the other models that we start with goals and objectives. At the same time, it emphasizes designing curriculum to engage students in exploring and deepening their understanding. And so we have the word enduring understanding that is very essential in the understanding by design. So in UBD, we have three stages. Stage one is identify desired results. Stage two is determine acceptable evidence. And stage three is plan the learning experiences and instruction. Now you can see that the backward design is because assessment or evaluation is done before planning the learning experiences and instruction. Stage one indicates what the students should know, understand, or be able to do, or it also asks what is worthy of understanding, or what we call enduring understanding. Stage two calls for designing assessment evidence for documenting or validating whether the desired learning has been achieved. So already on the second stage, we try to identify what are the acceptable evidences that will prove in the that will prove that after the learning experiences, the students have achieved the desired results. You will now be stating there if you are going to create performance tasks or written works for your students to show or for them to demonstrate that they learned in your lessons. And stage three is including planning learning experiences. that are useful in implementing the curriculum. It also includes identifying activities and resources to be used. So that is the only time that we are going to identify the procedures or instructional procedures that we will make to implement the plan. So what advocacy made the model popular in the Philippines? Up to present, even if UBD is not already endorsed by the K-12 curriculum, UBD is still popular in the Philippines. And many educators see the benefits of following the understanding by design model. It advocates the use of enduring understanding or central ideas. And that is the one most important aspects of using the understanding by design or the UBD. This enduring understanding or central ideas are ideas with lasting value beyond the classroom and can be applied to other settings. At the same time, it also advocates for authentic assessment. And when assessments are authentic, students can relate to the assessment task that we are giving to them. They can apply the lessons into real life scenarios or situations. And that is why we have those ideas that are lasting beyond the classroom and can be applied to other settings. Now, what help can the model offer for teacher education institutions? If used in the Philippines, it can help the Commission on Higher Education, particularly our TEIs, to revise existing curricula to focus on higher understanding rather than just prescribing subjects and course descriptions. Meaning, those who will develop the curriculum for teacher education programs should focus more on these enduring understandings that the students will need to achieve at the end of their program. And these enduring understandings could provide a very good guide for them to identify what are the different subjects that they need to take and what are the activities for each subject that they will be taking. It can also make the curricula more learner-centered. That is the understanding by design. And these are the references for this lesson. The main reference used is the book of Pawilen, the teacher and the school curriculum, and Pawilen used the following sources from Blathorn, Boshi, and Whitehead, Taba, and Tyler. I hope you learned a lot from this lesson, and let us continue to know more about the other curriculum development models when we discuss cyclical and dynamic curriculum development models. Goodbye.